everyone, welcome back. I know I said I was going to do a series debunking AIG posts, but in doing the setup and research and seeing what all was posted by them, I realized I would be repeating myself all the time. So, instead I opted to cover the individual sciences and concepts they don't want to understand. While I was considering how to go about doing that, I caught a lucky break. A friend on Twitter was talking about his interactions with one individual, and I remembered his pinned tweet was a pretty good one-stop shop for what creationists see as evidence for God. I ran across this individual a while back, and as a result of a heated exchange, he blocked me. As far as I'm concerned, he is the product of heavy indoctrination and inculcation, but through Twitter friends, I have gotten him to unblock me. But due to my opinion of a lot of his beliefs, not just religiously but socially, I have largely ignored him in the interest of making what will become a series addressing his pinned tweet and the links associated for proof of God, which I will be covering point by point. I'm not doing this to embarrass him or call him out or anything like that, but his errors need to be corrected if he intends to work in any productive way in the field of science he wants to. He can still believe in God and be productive in that field, as some people are. However, his beliefs demand a lot of ignoring evidence and reality. I am not divulging his name or picture for 3 reasons. First of all, I don't want to have him blasted, though it was tempting to do that after our last exchange. There's no reason for that, and doing so would make him less willing to listen. Secondly, as misguided as he is a product of indoctrination and inculcation, but still young enough to hopefully learn where his errors are and correct them. He asks that people approach his evidence with what I'm equating to an open mind, which I will do so, but in return he should do the same for me. Third and finally, his arguments are all the same ones we hear time after time, so it's more effective to address him and those that think like him in one go, so I'm not accused of an ad hominem attack. Which brings me to the first point I need to address: what an ad hominem attack actually is. Ad hominem attacks can take the form of overtly attacking somebody or more subtly casting doubt on their character or personal attributes as a way to discredit their argument. The results of an ad hominem attack can be to undermine someone's case without actually having to engage with it, such as your opponent in a debate giving a well-thought-out argument, and instead of addressing the argument and evidence, you avoid it by asking if you can believe them based on some other point, like gender, age, or public standing, without even addressing the argument. It can easily be confused with questioning the credibility of the person delivering the argument by asking if they have the qualifications needed to speak on the subject at hand as an expert, or asking what their experience is or even their motivations in delivering their argument the way they did, all of which I do see as valid questions. But for the purposes of this series, I will save my critique of his sources for the last of the series and address the problems with the information in his source material first. I do appreciate that he made his list easy to navigate and did separate it into distinct categories of science and then history. The science won't be much trouble. I'm a big science enthusiast and have always studied biology, geology, cosmology, and a bit of paleontology and archaeology. I know I'm no expert, but I understand quite a bit in those fields, so that should help this along. The history I'll have to dig a little bit deeper for, but we'll get there. Now, remember when I said earlier that he asked that people look at this with what I equated to an open mind? He worded it this way: as having a soft heart, and to deny what I'm going to read here would make me worse off than I started, as in a hardened heart. Now, I think I understand what I hope he means by this. He's looking for an open mind, which I have and indeed encourage. There is, however, a point where you need to remain skeptical. Keep an open mind, by all means, but not so open that your brain falls out of your skull. If the evidence is compelling, then by all means, change your position. I have, and probably will again, because the evidence was good enough to convince me. The next part of his tweet is a disclaimer that it's just a compilation of his own sources, and unless he says otherwise, he doesn't own them, which is reasonable to say. I won't deny that. Now, some of his links are videos, and some of them I have seen before, and I know them to be extremely long. I will address the main points and link them so that you can see what I skipped and omitted, because it was not something I found directly relevant or it was repeated. I prefer documents for this very reason, but I'll work with it. He does have a section before he gets to his evidence that covers definitions, and I'm sorry to say that they are all wrong in one way or another. Science isn't just knowledge. It is how to know what you know, and more importantly, how you can show it to be true. The scientific method is part of this investigative process, a process that has been designed to virtually, if not completely, remove bias from the work if used properly. Evolution in the biological use of the word is what concerns the next three definitions he lists, which are not separate at all. Evolution is a theory of biodiversity and is more than just change over time. It is descent with inherited modifications. It isn't flawed, and it has been proven in the legal sense as having an overwhelming body of evidence supporting it. I'll be going into more detail on this later on, but for now I need to address this word kind that always pops up. Kind, as it is used by religious believers, is a useless term. They use it to distinguish one type of animal from another, like scientists use words like species, but the difference is that a kind was created through some supernatural means. The definition he uses is provided by AIG and the president of the organization, Ken Ham. Now, there is an immediate problem here, as the three sources that he lists can't agree with each other. The first source is a video on baraminology, a strictly creationist field of study to determine what animals fall into what kind. In the video, which is only a couple of minutes long, kind is said to be usually accepted to be at the family level of Linnaean taxonomy. Now, Ken's view is the same, and that's the third source that's listed. But the second one is where we have a problem. It links to the AIG article, What is a Kind? This article shows that it is a term that they can't even nail down, as it is admitted that the term can and is used to describe the last 4 out of the 7 original Linnaean ranks: order, family, genus, and species, effectively turning the term into a movable goalpost. For this reason, if I use the word kind from here on, it is referring to a supernatural creation, and until somebody gives a universally accepted definition of what a biblical kind is, I will only use it to signify that I am referring to a supernatural creation. Now, as far as I can tell, the way that they use kind seems to describe a clade. A clade, for clarification, is a group of animals that share an inherited diagnostic trait. Clades branch off into daughter groups when a new unique trait emerges or a pre-existing trait is lost. Now, that's a real hang-up for a lot of people, because evolution does not demand that new species or whatever always gain something, which is a disturbingly common misconception. Sometimes a loss results in streamlining for efficiency or specialization. Now, at this point, I need to bring up the phylogeny challenge, which was posted by Aaron Ra. Links below. The challenge is meant to find out where the line gets drawn, to show what a kind is. The challenge is to name 2 taxa, 2 categories of animals, that scientists say are closely related, but that creationists consider to be separated kinds, meaning having no common ancestor. He asks a series of yes or no questions, and where you say no is where you draw the line, and say that these can't be related. At that point, you're supposed to say why you think that, and provide evidence supporting your position. To this day, he's received more than a dozen replies, but most don't seem to understand the question, while others fail to provide any evidence. Now, most but not all creationists accept that microevolution is a real thing that actually happens. They have to, because this is how they square the story of Noah's flood. Now, in their mind, the life we have today, they say, came from original created kinds that were saved on the ark. The problem is that there are species of animals they would consider to be the same kind, which are no longer able to interbreed and produce viable offspring. They are no longer the same species. And that runs counter to the idea of kinds, because they should be able to produce viable offspring if they are still part of the same kind, especially if, as creationists say, the genetic code was loaded with all the variety of life we have today, which is the only way they can work around mutations. Now, I'll be going into more detail on mutations later on, but the point I need to make here is that there is no way that kind can be used as a scientific term. It is way too vague, and with no universally accepted definition, it's not at all up to the standards expected of scientific terminology. So that's going to be it for now. We've got a long way to go, but we'll get this done one step at a time. Like, subscribe, and comment, and as always, stay curious, guys.